Yo, Shortbox Nation. Hello again. Welcome back, and thanks for pressing play today. If you're brand new, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Badr Milligan, and this is the Shortbox Podcast, the comic book talk show where we bridge the gap between the panels of your favorite comics with the people who put their blood, sweat, and tears into making them. This is episode 498, and today's guest is comic writer Joshua Williamson. If you go on Google right now and you search for hardest working man in comics today, a big old picture of Joshua Williamson will be the top result. All right, Scouts Honor, give that a shot. You'll have the same results. And honestly, that's only a slight exaggeration. Right, I'm only slightly exaggerating on that part. Joshua is writing not one, not two, but three ongoing comic series. One for each of the three major comic publishers at that. I'm talking G.I. Joe for Image Comics. He's writing the main Superman ongoing series for DC, which he's been writing since 2023. And most recently in January, he returned to Marvel Comics after a decade-long hiatus to write and launch a brand new Iron Man series alongside artist Carmen Carnero, which is up to issue 4 at the time of this recording. And that's just talking about his recent work. You can't bring up Joshua Williamson and not mention his iconic 100 issue run of Flash, or his creator-owned work such as Ghosted, Birthright, and Nailbiter, which we'll hopefully get into this episode. But before we get into that, I want to give a special recognition to our amazing sponsors who help us keep the lights on. Big shout outs to our sponsors, including Gotham City Limit Comic Shop, the best comic shop in Northeast Florida. Visit the shop for yourself here in Jacksonville, Florida on Southside Boulevard, or buy comics from them online at GothamCityLimit.com. And last but not least, big shout outs to IDW Publishing, the company that publishes great comics like TMNT, Beneath the Trees, and Godzilla. Find great comics from IDW at your local comic shop or buy them directly from IDW at IDWPublishing.com. Once again, big shout outs to Gotham City Limit and IDW Publishing. Now, without further ado, let's bring on our guest of honor today, all right? Writing Iron Man, Superman, and G.I. Joe at the same damn time. Shortbox Nation, let's welcome to the show, Joshua Williamson. What up, Joshua? How you doing?
I'm good. How you doing? Is this really so is this your 498th podcast?
Yeah, you'll either be 498 or 499, depending on how the schedule goes. But yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Congratulations. You're so close to 500, dude. That's dope.
Thank you. Don't ask me what I have planned for the 500.
Yeah.
It fills me with dread.
I bet. Dude, it's funny. Yeah, planning ahead is a funny thing. Yeah, dude, it's funny that when you're listening to all the stuff like that I've done or worked on. I know I do a lot. I know I've always done a lot, and it's funny. I feel like the last 2 years, I've definitely cut back a bit, like publicly cut back. I feel like, but I'm always doing a lot, like because there's sort of the ongoings. G.I. Joe, Superman, and Iron Man, but it's like I'm also doing a Wolfman miniseries for Skybound, like the Universal Monsters ones.
Yeah.
That's come out in June. I work on a bunch of little stuff for DC. I also do the consulting work for DC, which we could talk about a bit if you wanted to.
I absolutely want to hear what it's like being a consultant for a company like DC.
It's weird. It's weird, but and also, dude, like the amount of like secret projects I work on, like Legion of Superheroes is going to launch soon.
Wait, so you said that you were cutting down, but now you're listing like Wolfman, secret projects.
I cut down. I feel like I cut down 2 years ago a little bit. Yeah, 2 years ago I cut down a little bit, and then I ramped back up when I recognized where some of my burnout was coming from, and so I cut back, and then gradually just ramped it right back up. And I mean, it's kind of crazy. I feel like next year I haven't done the math yet. So in my office I have this 100-inch whiteboard, and I use that for mapping out a lot of stuff. Like when we did DCKO, I took a picture of it, and one of these days I'll post it. But the whole board was just covered in the planning of DCKO from beginning to end. Like it was like every little piece of it and all this stuff, how all the fights were going to work, everything. But on the far right side, I have like my schedule lined up, and it's lined out all the way until like the end of 28, like to 2028. Wow. So it shows me what I'm working on and stuff, And I look at that and I'm like, man, if you think I'm busy right now, when you see next year, you're gonna think I'm a crazy person. Like you're gonna be like,
Jeez
how are you
Louise.
doing this? I'm like, I just don't sleep. That's all it is.
I need to get my
Uh,
ass into gear. I'm sitting here like, what am I gonna do 3 episodes from now? And you've got your 2028 plan. That's
yeah,
insane.
I know, it's crazy. Like I could, if things are going as planned, I could literally tell you what I'm working on
Hmm.
in like the summer of 28. You know, so it's like, and there's other stuff. You know, there's other things. There's creator own books that I'm putting together and things like that. So it's like, yeah, I'm always doing a lot. That's just my nature. I don't know.
Yeah, on this topic, I want to ask. I didn't get a chance to ask before we hit record. Are you based out of Portland still? Are you still in Portland?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, then that leads me to my a very important question here and how busy you are. What's in the water in Portland? Because I found a list online of like all the
Who
comic
lives here?
creators. Yeah, it's like Alex Ross, Brian Michael Bendis, Rick Remender, Matt Fraction, Kelly Sue DeConnick, Jeff Parker. I mean, like, and then obviously, like you, what is it about Portland that you think attracts or supports so much like comic book talent?
Well, the ironic thing is, I moved here because of Rick Remender, and then a year later, Rick Remender moved away. Rick Remender is back in LA, actually. He has been for almost 10 years now. But so, uh, man, so almost 20 years ago, Rick Remender wrote an article for CBR about Portland and how Portland was becoming this comics hub, right? And so it's like outside of LA and New York, Portland has the largest comics community. Like the majority of people work here. And, I think some of that started off with like Dark Horse and Oni were here. Like, I think that's the thing, because, one led to the other, right? So there was Dark Horse, and Dark Horse led to Oni, and there was Top Shelf, and now Image has been here for almost 10 years, I think. Um, and so you have the publishers here, and then you start having creators. And then I think the creator who moved here that really started the trek here, the one that started people really pulling people in, was Bendis. Like
Hmm.
once Bendis got here, because you're talking about like there's a lot of legends that are here, like
Yeah.
Matt Wagner, and
Hmm.
the Bob Schreck is here now, and you had all these people coming here. But I think once Bendis came here, that really started making it like a magnetic pull, right? And there
Hmm.
was a couple of different studios here, and so Brian was here, and then that's actually what got Matt and Kelly here, and like Gail Simone has always lived here, but she lives closer to the coast. Rucka is here, and I forget how
Yeah.
Rucka got here. I think he might have got here because same thing, because of Bendis. I think he was in Seattle for a minute. I might be wrong on that because Brubaker was in Seattle. But like all these people just moved here, and so I read this article from Rick Remender where he was like, "This is what's going on. This is why it's here. This is why it's great." And I moved here, and the first day I was here, I was like, I'm gonna go check out the comic book store. And I walked in
Yeah.
this comic book store, and I kid you not, I ran into Jim Valentino and Brian Michael Bendis on my first day here at the comic book
That's so
store.
cool.
And then it became this thing where it was like, it really was like, I immediately saw how quickly it was like, oh no, there's a big community here, because you couldn't go anywhere without running into Summer of Comics, and people hung out. There was dinners and signings, and it really was like a community. And so I was in it immediately. Now I never see anybody ever because I leave my house. But
You have a
unless I'm
small
doing
comic
something,
shop. You have a small comic shop in your office, from what I can tell and what you told
yeah,
me so far.
yeah. I'll go to the comic book store. What's really funny is the comic book store. I'm not gonna say what they are, but the comic book store that I go to here in Portland, that's closest to my house, they don't know I'm me.
Get out of here.
So I can walk in. I think a couple people figure it out. One time I was in there, and somebody from Things in Their World was there, and they, like, which is a major chain here, they were there. They didn't work there, but they were there, and they saw me and
Interesting.
talked to me for a second. And so I was like, oh, I think one of the employees was like at this other shop was like, wait, what? Um but yeah, they because I usually come with the kids, and I'll buy things, for myself and stuff like that. But I mostly am there to like let the kid. This is the one that's closest to me, so I'm like,
Yeah.
my kids buy some comics and stuff, and I'll buy stuff and everything. But they don't know it's me. Um, but yeah, dude, like here it's just a big comics community. A lot of people,
Hmm.
there was a guy who I had met when I was in college. Oh, so Dennis Culver. So Dennis Culver, who I co-wrote some stuff with, and he's done some stuff at Image and Marvel, and he did Doom Patrol for DC a couple years ago. He and I actually met, man, I don't even know, like early 2000s, like really early 2000s in California. And so I was here for maybe like a month or two, and I ran into him, and I was like, "What are you doing here?" And he was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "I live here." And he was like, "I live here." So it's one of those things where it's just like
Spider-Man point meme. Yeah.
it's just a pull of this location. And
Hmm.
I think especially when I was coming up, it was awesome because you get to be around a lot of other people that are coming up, a lot of other creators. I got to
Mm-hmm.
listen to people, and Jeff Parker, who's also a comic book writer and a comic book
Yeah.
artist. But I think
He's so
he
good.
was somebody. Steve Lieber, like those guys run a studio here, so it's like I would run to them and just learn stuff, hear stuff. And then Bendis, he actually teaches a class at PSU, and the first year he did it was 2010, and I was in that first class that first year, and I had written books by then. I probably had the most experience out of that class in terms of publishing, self-publishing, working. I had already worked at Marvel and DC by then. And so I was in his class and stuff. But yeah, man, Portland, I'm not I would blame Bendis more than anything else. I'm
Yeah.
sure somebody else is gonna be like blame Mike Richardson, because
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's all connected. But
Mm-hmm.
it probably is Dark Horse. I think Dark Horse is really the key element that kicked it off 30 or 40 years ago, really. But yeah.
What would you say is the most helpful, most important thing, whatever adjective you want to pick, thing that you learned from that class from Bendis?
Bendis's class, man. There's a lot it took me a long time to learn. It's like it took me a long time to like let the things from Brian's class really click in my head.
Hmm.
And there was all kinds of stuff. I mean, dude, there was so much I learned from him in that class. But I think one of the most important things, and he really talked about this a lot, like it was the thing that he really hit on, which is really being yourself, like your writing, putting yourself in your
Hmm.
writing, and having your own individual like voice and style. Like what is your thing? It's like, I'm not sure if you're a wrestling fan at all, but it's like, what's your gimmick that separates you from everybody else? You are a wrestling fan?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're
I
gonna get
actually
one. That's
okay.
fine.
So I won't say I'm like there's some serious diehard wrestling fans that I know that would call me out, but I did have a chance to go to Mexico 2 weeks ago and go
Oh,
watch a
nice.
Lucha Libre match
Yeah,
live,
yeah,
and it was like a religious experience. So like
yeah.
I
Dude.
am a budding. I'm trying to get back into. I was really big into wrestling as a kid, fell off into it,
Yeah.
but now I feel like, like I think that Lucha Libre match, my friends being really big fans, it's I don't know. I'm starting to get like revitalized into it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've had moments. Right now I'm kind of falling out of it a little bit. But I remember there was a moment where I was kind of down on it. I went to a PWG show in California, and it was like that's where, and I got to see. This is where you're seeing like, this is back in the day, so it's like Seth Rollins when he wasn't Seth
Hmm.
Rollins. He had a completely different name, and then you're talking about like Daniel Bryan. Like I saw him wrestling before he was in the NXT, all that stuff. I got to watch those guys, and now it's always fun when you get to go to a live event. It's like a whole other. There's something different about like going to a big WWE event, or AEW, like going to a big one. When you go to one that's like smaller, more intimate, with people who are just starting to break in, there's something about that there's like an energy there that can be really, really fun. It can help you remember, like, oh, that's why I love this. But yeah, so with Bendis, yeah, man, Bendis. I think the voice thing was something that he really harped on a lot. But it was like, I don't know, man. I could probably sit down and make a list of stuff because I really did learn a lot from that class. And some of it took a minute to get there, of just like knowing to breathe. I remember it was funny. I was probably a little frustrating for Brian because I remember one time I went up to him and I had done this assignment and I got a good grade on it. And I was like, I want some notes. I want some notes. And he pointed at the grade. It was like an A, and he's like, "There's your note." And I was like, "No, man." And I was so very like, "Oh, I really want to do work for Marvel and DC." And he was very like, "You're clearly very ambitious." Like that was I think that was the biggest takeaway with me was, and we already knew each other a bit before that.
Yeah.
But I think he was sort of like, "Oh, you're very ambitious." One of the parts that's I think weird about my career sometimes is because I started trying to break in when I was a lot younger, right? Like, and I found myself in the space with a lot of creators. So like Jeff Johns, I actually met Jeff Johns when I was like 19 years old.
Wow.
He had just started writing The Flash, so I've known him like his whole career too. So it's like it's interesting. I think a lot of people I met, like Bendis, Kirkman, Brubaker, some of these people I met when I was like in my late teens, early 20s. And so I think, and like John Layman is a writer who did Chew, he did Titans. I've known John since I was like, yeah, 20. And like these are like John used to be an editor at Wildstorm, and so I remember pitching him stuff really early on. So it's kind of weird sometimes when I'm like in the position I'm in now and doing the work I am now. I'm like, I've known some of these people. They've known me since I was a kid. I feel like it's a weird thing, but yeah, Bendis' class was really interesting, dude. I have to think about that some more, but I could probably write a list of like the 10 things that I really took away.
Well, I mean, I've got 2 follow-up questions. What would you say is the most, you mentioned, the advice being, hey, find your voice, find your shtick, what makes you, what separates you from the pack. And, I could have easily like spent another like 10 minutes, like naming all of your accolades and all these the stories you've done, right? Which one would you personally say, like, is the most you, like, that really represents your voice, or the one where you found your voice?
I mean, Nailbiter. I think Ghosted was the one
Funny you say
where
that.
where Ghosted was the one where I really started being like, I'm doing it my way. Because I think when you're coming in, you want to be a little bit of a yes man at times. You want to be helpful. You want to be additive, and it's like when I first started breaking in, you're doing every note. You're doing everything you can. You're just trying to say yes to everything. You haven't learned how to say no yet. And I had some defeats early in my career. Like I had some like, got jobs, got taken off jobs, felt like I had my foot in the door. I did not have my foot in the door at all. Like I had all these things that kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
And then there were all these little challenges here and there. And I remember with Ghosted was the time where I was like, okay, this is me. I'm gonna figure this out. Like I'm gonna do it this way. This is more me doing it my way, not doing it somebody else's way. Because what happens is, and I talked about a bit you sort of start becoming like a mimic, because you're just like, well, if they want me to do it this way, I'll do it this way. And that was always one of my biggest challenges as my career, was like not trying to mimic other people. And so it's like when I started doing Ghosted, that was a bit more me being like, okay, this is a bit more me. By the time I got to Nailbiter, it was weird, because it was like that was me really doing all the stuff I like to do, being a little bit looser with it, not being as stressed about it, but then also saying to myself, like, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder at that point, because I had struggled with my Marvel and DC work. I couldn't get some attention in the areas I wanted. I wasn't happy with some of the work I was doing. And then Nailbiter, and I was thinking about this earlier today, actually, like Nailbiter got rejected by so many people. Like Vertigo rejected it. Oni rejected it. Like all these publishers rejected it. And then I was trying to pitch it to Dark Horse, and Dark Horse just had all these notes and all these things that just, it felt like it was the problem. It wasn't mine anymore. It was going to, and so I was getting frustrated with that. And it was just one of those things where I was like, it was one of those moments of like, I know I'm right. Like, I know I have this correct. And we did Nailbiter like my way, like Mike and I, we did it our way, the way we wanted to do it. Because Mike Henderson and I had done some stuff before that, so we knew each other, and we knew how to work with each other. I know what he liked, he knew what I liked. So it hit, and then it became this big hit, and it sold really well, and that's actually what got me. It sold really well. It did really well, and then I did Birthright after that. Birthright's very me as well. Birthright's very personal. And both those books are what got me the job on The Flash. And it was because there was a guy at DC at the time. He went to Dan DiDio, and it was Hank Canals. Hank Canals showed Dan DiDio. He was like, look at the sales on the trades. Like, look at his trade sales. And that's when Dan was like, okay, we'll take the meeting. And that's basically what got me the job on The Flash. Like that's sort of what led to it, was that. And so, but yeah, Nailbiter is the one, I think, to this day. And there are things here and there, it's tough, because when you work on something you don't own, and you're trying to have ownership of it, like even when I was on Flash, it's like I don't own Flash, but it's like, and I'm just another person in that relay race, right? They've handed it to me, and it's my job to run it. But I have this thing I can tell you about creator owned and working on the licensed books and doing work for hire books, is like, you are babysitting somebody else's kid. That is not your kid. So it's like, you can take care of that kid as much as you want. You do not own that child. You are babysitting that kid. And that's how you are taking care of that kid. And that's how I always see working on those things. But when you are doing a creator owned book, that is your baby. Like, that is a whole other world of things to get into. But so even when I was on Flash and stuff like that, there's other forces at play. There's other things you got to consider. There's other creators, editorial, all these different things come at you. and then you're just trying to navigate your way through. So it's like there are times Flash is like oddly almost autobiographical at times. But when you look at things, you know, I think even like Damian, like when I was doing Robin with Damian, and then you do things like now with Superman. I think Superman is probably one of the more me books at DC in a way that I've done. But yeah, I mean, Nailbiter is probably the most like this is it, and trying to remember that sometimes is it can be challenging because you get caught up in. Sometimes it's tough because you get caught up in, and you'll hear this from people about work for hire comics in general, but you're told a lot what comics should be constantly, and what ends up happening is you end up eliminating what comics could be, right? Because people are constantly telling you what it should be. And then because you're constantly hearing that, whether it's from editorial or other voices in your head or voices from outside, it sometimes can be limiting. And I find that more so with work for hire than anything else, you know? Yeah. And so it's oh, it's interesting. It's something I keep an eye on when I'm working.
Josh, I got so many follow-up questions in my
All right,
head.
go ahead. I'll stop talking.
No. I'm like, man, my man is cooking right now. He's in this stream of conscious. He's like being reflective. I love it. But man, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up that when Nailbiter came out, which I believe the first issue came out 2014. I think I was still working at the comic shop. A big shout out, RIP, Universal Superheroes here in Jacksonville, Florida. I was working there. I want to say either that was towards the tail end or in the middle. I forget. But I remember when Nailbiter came out, and I'm being a little vulnerable here. As someone that used to bite his nails like a lot, you know, I was a nervous nail biter. I could not read that story. It was like too personal for me, even though we sold so many fucking copies of Nailbiter. I personally was like, nah, this is too close to home. I will admit to you, I did not read the first trade until maybe a couple of days ago, and I was like, God damn, this shit is great. My jam from you personally was Birthright, bro. When Birthright came out, I was collecting every issue. I forget where I stopped, but man, I loved Birthright. It was like the fantasy element. Andrea Bresson, I think that was his name. Yeah. Bresson art was stupid incredible, and then like there was this noir mystery aspect to it. Man, I loved it, Birthright, and I remember when Nailbiter came out. And you brought up Flash. That was another series that we could not keep in the shop at all, and it was one of my big shout outs to Drew, my best friend, one of the biggest Flash fans I know. He praised your Flash series every month. He was a huge fan of it. And I was talking to him today about it. I'm like, dude, I'm interviewing Joshua Williamson. He's like, bro, come on, you got to ask him about this. You got to ask him about that. And he brings up the Flash series, and I was like, yeah, I just learned that it's like it ran for 100 issues. And I was like, can you name someone else that's done that in the last decade? And we could not bring up. It was hard for us.
I can tell you who's done it.
The only name I could bring up, let's see if it's the same. Let's say it on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Todd McFarlane.
Jason Aaron. No,
Jason Aaron.
Jason Aaron wrote over 100 issues of Thor total. If you add everything up, it's over 100. It's like 100 and something. Okay. Todd McFarlane, you're right. Todd McFarlane has written. Well, it's weird, right? Because he would have guest writers on Spawn. Like he would have guest writers. Like right now, you know, I think, Rosenberg has taken over the main book and King Spawn right now.
Yeah. Okay. I see. Where you're going with
that. Jason Aaron did over, I think, like a little over 100 issues of Thor when you add everything up from like, you have like Thor's during Secret War, and you have Mighty Thor.
And that's a good point.
All these different Thors. It gets. I know it's over 100, but I don't know the exact number. It's not as many as I did because I actually did. I think total, technically, it's 101, and then it's like if you include annuals and specials and all this stuff, then it's like 109 or 10 or something like that.
I'm curious how much of that, like we're talking about you finding your voice. At what point in the totality of Flash, 101 issues plus annuals and all of that, did you feel like you entered, like, did you ever hit autopilot mode at some point? Like, did it ever get like pretty easy, or was it like even more challenging because you're like, fuck, I'm like running out of ideas?
I never ran out of ideas. The biggest challenge on Flash was that it was a double ship and I had to write it out of order. So what would happen is that like, so Howard Porter, if we wanted to have him do 4, 5, 6 issues in a row, so like I want him to do Flash War, right? And so he
Mm-hmm.
has to do Flash War. Okay, well that means I gotta start writing Flash War in like, let's say it hits in June. Okay, well I gotta start writing in October.
Hmm.
But which is what happened. I'm writing it in October. I also have to, but that means I'm writing it in advance. So basically, I was writing Flash. Let me get this right. So I'm writing Flash 38 and 47 at the same time. So it meant outlining. It meant it was difficult to pivot. It meant that sometimes, some issues would breathe, some issues would get smashed a little bit. Um, so it was weird. It was never easy. I don't think I ever got an autopilot. Don't worry, there were tricks. There were tricks you could pull. You could do
Yeah.
like 2-page spread, flash running. Like things like that. But you couldn't.
I
It never.
imagine.
It never
I
got.
imagine there was a lot of that.
Oh, there's a lot of those. There's a lot of those. I always make that joke. That's my joke about the relation between writers and artists is that like an artist is gonna spend a fucking week on that, and I'm like flash running, 2-page spread. Boop. Take me all of like 10 seconds to write that
God, that's
page.
fucking hilarious. That's hilarious. Yeah.
But same. I mean, I don't do a lot of 2-page spreads, Superman's flying
Hmm.
pages, but you know what I mean. It's like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, it was never easy on that one. It was always tough. I never felt like I necessarily. There are arcs I like more than others. You know, there's some I really enjoy, but that's part of the problem was we were having to do these out of order, and then obviously you have a lot of editorial interference. You have people. You got things going on, companies pivot, things change. All of a sudden, it's
Sure.
like,
Sure.
oh well, this book's doing X, Y, Z. So you got to be mindful of those things. And I'm very much a believer of like I want that book to take place in the DC universe, not
Sure.
be
Yeah.
not be siloed off. So that means that like if something's happening over here in the DC universe, I want to reflect it.
You know
So
what?
that was challenges. Yeah.
On the topic of that, I've been dying to ask you this question about
Yeah.
continuity. I've read,
Yeah.
I was reading an article, and you mentioned that you said, "Hey, I'm quote, I'm personally obsessed with continuity, but I've grown up to be like I can honor it and then move forward, et cetera, et cetera." I'm currently reading this book called All of the Marvels by Douglas Wolk,
Yeah. I know
and
Doug. Yeah. He's here. He's
oh,
from
where?
Portland too.
God damn it, the Portland connection goes deep, baby. The Portland Mafia. So I guess for anyone that is not familiar with this book, Douglas Woke is the author. He took on this insane task to read every single Marvel comic from the beginning
Yeah.
to 2017. I think was his cutoff. He had some other criteria, but all in all, he ends up reading over 27,000 Marvel comics. And the book is about his experience, what Marvel comics can tell you, and I love the way that he frames Marvel comics and continuity, where it's like, yeah, there's 27,000 issues, but it's one massive story that spans 60 years, multiple
Hmm.
writers. Like it's one kind of this one ever evolving organism, and the baton
Yeah.
gets passed, layers get added to it. I'm just curious to hear like how you approach continuity, and if your thoughts on it have changed any, being so ingrained with a character like Flash or writing Superman with so much continuity.
I have maybe mixed feelings on it now. I think you should always honor what has come before and try to not be dismissive. Like there's a difference between well, okay, so one thing about the Marvel thing is funny is I mean Marvel is the longest ongoing narrative story in history.
Yes. Yeah.
It just is, and there's pros and cons of that. But so my take on is that I think it's disrespectful to completely ignore something, completely ignore it, or dismiss it. Like there's a difference between there are times in Superman where it's like I'm not going to mention every single time Superman has done something, right? I can't. There's no way, right? There's stuff right now with Superboy Prime that I will find a time and a place to mention certain things from the past. But I'm also not going to negate it. I'm not going to ignore it. I'm not going to like put it down necessarily. Um, I'm weird about it because I feel like I'm a little bit less precious about the past than I used to be. But there are times every once in a while, like I was on a Zoom on Wednesday. Tyler was there for this, and one of the editors started talking about the order of events of when Secret Origin started for Green Lantern Secret Origin. And I was like, actually, I was like, this is how it went. It was Rebirth, then it was Green Lantern, and Secret Origin was like later, like in the run. It didn't start with Secret Origin. They did Secret Origin later in the run. And because I couldn't let that go. Like I was like, no, I gotta set the record straight. So it kind of depends, dude. I mean, I think that like it's tough, dude. I think it's impossible to cover everything. You can't. I've had this conversation with other friends, and I was thinking about this earlier today, where it's like there are times I'll be in the room and we're talking about ideas for the future, and somebody's like, "Oh, we did this," and I'm like, "DC did that 10 years ago." Oh, DC did that 15 years ago. Or somebody did that story 30 years ago. And a few different creators who I'm friends with have been like, you got to find a cutoff. Like, you got to be like, it's okay if it was more than 10 years ago. Yeah. It's like, because, comics is kind of always does repeat itself. It's almost built into comics. At this point, you're going to repeat yourself in comics. And you have to be able to make peace with it. And so I think I'm better now about making peace with it than I was in the past. I think in the past, I was you can see it in the Flash run. The Flash run is very continuity heavy. Damian was less so. Robin was less so. And Superman, I mean, it's interesting because I definitely go back and look at stuff, but I had a rule on Superman to not try and touch on any of the continuity pieces that like Grant or Jeff did. It was much more about trying to find my own path on it. If anything, it's more influenced by the Dan Jurgens, triangle era of the 90s than anything else. But even then, there are times like I'm doing research on something and I got to go back. I have a comic on my desk right now. I'm not going to show you what it is, but I had to go back and read a comic from 20 years ago. Yeah, 20 years ago, geez. For a continuity thing today. Like, just to make sure I wasn't, like, blowing up something, So it just depends. It's tricky. It's tricky. I don't think you should be... I think people should be... I think there's a way of not being precious about it, but also being respectful of it. You just got to kind of... It's definitely a fine line to walk sometimes, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah. It's a balancing act for sure, I imagine. Well, on this topic, before we get into this next segment, we mentioned Nailbiter, your early stuff, your creator-owned stuff, Nailbiter, Ghosted, Birthright. Like, you went from indie horror, supernatural noir guy to the architect of the DC universe, or one of them for sure. What was the biggest mental shift in that transition?
Well, so part of it is I've always been a DC nerd, but I was a DC and Vertigo nerd. So you're talking about, when I was in my teen years, I was reading all these superhero books. I was reading for Marvel, I was still reading Spider-Man and the X-Men like everybody else, and I would read a lot of other books. But DC was the one where I kind of felt like I was reading everything. Like I was reading everything for DC. Every book, I was reading Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, Flash, Batman, Superman. I was reading all the Batman books. I was reading everything. But I was also reading all the Vertigo books. I was a big Preacher kid. I really loved The Invisibles. Like I was reading a lot of that. And so there's those two sides to me where it's like, I really, really love Vertigo comics, but I also love superhero books. So then when, like that's what I felt like. I felt like those books that I was making, they were Vertigo books. Like I felt like Ghosted, Birthright, Nailbiter. I felt like those were Vertigo books. That's what I felt was a Vertigo book, right? And so that's where my head was. But I still loved superheroes and I still loved those characters. And so so here's the funny thing is that, the mental shift really happened because of Rebirth. Because I had kind of fallen out of DC a little bit during New 52, like a lot of people did, but I kind of fell off it a little bit. And I was very much just doing my own thing. I was happy living in indie land. I was happy doing my creator-owned books and doing what I felt was Vertigo and, doing these kind of books I really loved. When I came into DC, originally my pitch for The Flash was darker. It was much more of a crime book. It was going to be like my original pitch. And I remember I had this opening arc that was going to be this much more grounded kind of crime story. And then my second arc was the Speed Force Storm stuff. And so what was interesting about coming into DC in that exact moment was that I was coming to DC in that exact moment where what Jeff Johns and everybody was doing with Rebirth, all this stuff, was very much about returning to core. Like that was it. It was getting everything back to what this specific version of DC was. And it was interesting because it was actually a version of DC that I really loved. So I was kind of coming in it in a moment. That's really where that mental shift happens, because it was like I'm coming into DC at a moment where DC is pulling everything back to that core, right? Like, and that's the thing, Jeff talked about a lot, was like get everything back to being this kind of like a very specific version of what DC Comics is, right? So when I'm coming into the company again, and in that moment, that's really where that switch happens, is that. But that's why when you look at the stuff I was doing outside it, or even when I did like the Rogues book for Black Label, or when I do the stuff I do outside the company, it's still very much in that, like, what I guess I consider my version of Vertigo, whatever. It's still in that kind of headspace.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really do a lot of superhero stuff outside it, but it's also interesting because when you're working on some of these superhero books, it is a bit more commercial. Like, that does lean a little bit into the what this should be thing. It's interesting, It's like, and so it's an interesting balancing to walk between the two. But it is funny. Like, I don't know if I'll ever completely abandon superheroes. If I stop enjoying it, that's a different conversation. If I feel a different kind of struggle with it. But I do think if I ever leave DC, it's not like I'm gonna go do more superheroes. If I ever like walk away and stuff completely, it's like, because Iron Man is a whole other thing. But it's like, if I just suddenly decide like I'm done with superheroes, it won't be weird at all. I'll just be back at a different home, just doing my creator own book. So I don't know. But that's really where the mental switch happened, was because literally that's what was happening at DC in that moment. It was like we're getting back to a specific type of DC book, and then it just worked, and I enjoyed it. So I was like, I'm staying here. But it is funny how there are times where it's like I wonder how my career would be different if I came back at DC in a moment where they were not doing that. If they were in a different space. Like, that's the thing right now. Like, DC is in such a different space than it was during Rebirth, where it is a lot more creative and creator focused. The energy is very different, and I think you'll see that when we eventually reveal more of the stuff for Legion. I think you'll see Legion as being very different. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Look, in terms of superhero stuff, I think you're at the top of the mountain, Josh.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
With that said, I know that we got to be time conscious for this, so I want to get into a segment I like to call the Short Box Friends and Family segment. It's where I shut up for a little bit and let someone else ask the questions. I reached out to a couple of people to submit some questions for you via voicemail. I'm gonna play them here for you now. The first voicemail comes from Ben Kingsbury. He's the not only the sponsor of this segment, but he's also the owner of Gotham City Limit Comic Shop, my local comic shop and the best comic shop here in Florida. He heard you'd be on the show. He has been a huge fan of the G.I. Joe series you've written, and he prepared a question for you. So we're going to let him kick us off.
Hey, Josh, Ben K from Gotham City Limit, a comic shop down here in sunny Jacksonville, Florida. Thanks so much for taking some time to jump on the Short Box podcast. Botter is the best. So you're writing Superman every month for DC. You're writing the new Iron Man series for Marvel. You're also deep in the Energon universe, Duke, Cobra Commander, and G.I. Joe ongoing. Man, that's 3 wildly different worlds at the same time. So how do you keep all those ideas from bleeding together? Like, what's your system for switching gears so you don't get any Clark Kent Hope sneaking into Tony Stark's armor, or worse, into Cobra Commander's war room? While we're at it, who's better to write, heroes or villains? Well, I'll leave you to answer. I just want to say, as a comic shop owner, thank you so much for the passion that you put into the industry. We literally couldn't do it without you. And remember, Short Box Nation, we'll always take it to the limit. Peace.
God damn, that was an energetic voice.
That was a good one. Yeah. I'll answer the question. Well, first, if you're listening, Ben, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you're saying, and same to you, man. Thank you so much for all your hard work. I worked at a comic. I've told this story a billion times, I think, at this point, but I worked at a comic book store all through high school, all through college, and so I'm very well aware of what it's really like on the front line, and it's very much in my mind when I'm working is what my experience was working in that counter and trying to sell these books and being excited about these books and making sure we always give Scott Snyder, I tell us all the time, is making sure we're giving the retailers something they can be excited about when they're selling those books. So I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you so much for your questions. Man, villains are always fun to write. Like, I mean, they just are. I feel like either villains or jerk characters, you know? That's why all my books, I always find a way to sneak either a villain as a supporting character or a jerk character. So you notice, like, even as far back as Flash, that's why Godspeed plays such a major role in the book. That's why Superman, I had Lex there from day one. You know, he was a supporting character. With Tony and Iron Man, you know, he could be a jerk at times, but also you got like Madam Mask plays a big role in the book. You know, everything I work on, I always have either a villain or like a regular villain character or a jerk character, because it just makes something about it. I think Superman can be tough sometimes. It kind of annoys me. I think maybe I shouldn't say annoyed when people talk about Superman being easy to write, and I'm like, what? You mean the character that can do no wrong? The character who's right all the time, who's always does the right thing every time. You know, but yeah, I like the villain characters. As for the universes, this is the thing I think about this a lot. Where it's like I talk to people about taking on new projects and stuff, and I'm like, I don't just exist in different books. My brain exists in completely different universes right now. You know, it's like I got the Marvel universe, I got the Energon universe, I got the DC universe, and then I have other books that I work on and stuff like that. I consider them all universes. They are universes. And so that's always the biggest thing. But I just remind myself what the tone, the genre of that universe is, those characters. I'm not a big fan of, there's this phrase, filing the serial numbers off, you know? People will have an idea. There's this thing, somebody talked about this, where it's like, they have an idea for Superman, and DC would reject it, so they would try to take the idea over to Marvel to do it on Spider-Man. And it's like, you shouldn't be able to do that. You shouldn't be able to do that, right? Because if the story is based around that character, you shouldn't be able to do that. And so that's why I don't get a lot of bleed through. I will say, I think I have certain ticks. I have certain things that I love that come out through the work, like that is an example, is that, like, if you look at all my work, there are some, like, a villain usually operates as a supporting character. Like, that is something that is there. I usually pick a couple characters that I focus on. I have my own little weird obsessions. Those make their way through my books. For example, I love haunted houses. Just love them. So you'll notice a lot of my work, almost all of it has somebody going to a haunted house at some point. Like, so, you know, that's even that too. Like, I love horror at the end of the day. Like, I'm a big horror fan. So a lot of times horror makes its way into my comics in some form or another, you know? It's kind of funny. It's like when you think about Sam Raimi as a director, and, you know, some people know him as, like, the guy who directs Spider-Man movies, but, you know, the rest of us are like, oh no, Evil Dead, you know, Army of Darkness, you know, Darkman. Like, you're looking at these movies, and it's funny when you watch, like, Spider-Man 2, and then you're reminded, like, oh, that's right, this guy was a horror director, right? So it's like, I feel like there's a version of that in all my work. But yeah, when it comes to that stuff, I just keep, I kind of dedicate each week to a project. Right now, I feel like I'm dedicating 2 projects each week. But those are the pieces that kind of come together, is that I sort of just keep it separate. Out of you have to hear that character talking. You know, that's how I work. Like, there many steps for me in my process, but I gotta hear those characters talking to each other. I gotta hear them, and not, you know what I mean? I gotta hear Lex and Superman. I gotta hear them going at it. I gotta hear Prime. And then I gotta feel like I have to see the comic in my hands before I start writing. Like, there's a difference between writing and typing. Like, a lot of writing is done on my notebooks, on my whiteboards, in my head. And then the day comes and it's time to type. It usually takes me like 2 days to type a script, maybe 3 days. But it takes me forever sometimes to figure out what it is. But I got to hear those voices. So once I hear the voices, that's what separates it out, is those characters. Like, you can't, you know, like let's say Superman and Duke have some things in common, but then they don't. Like, because Duke, the way I write Duke is very impulsive. Very impulsive. Clark is not impulsive. So sort of balances it out. But there's the answer to those questions.
I do want to extend a compliment in terms of voice. I love the voice that you have for Superboy Prime. I just finished reading Superman 36 today. Superboy Prime Time starts here issue. Loved it, man. I am guilty. You know, I'm not even that guilty. I am a Superboy Prime fan. I know that he is kind of polarizing as a character,
contentious to people. Yeah,
man. I'm kind of here for him being back in the spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, I want to get into the second voicemail I got for you.
Yep.
And I'm going to leave this one as a surprise because I think you're going to recognize the voice immediately. Here we go.
Hey, Botter. Hey, Josh. It's Brad from Comic Book Couples Counseling. I'm sitting here on my couch. I'm actually lying down on my couch. My legs are kicked up, and all I want to do is talk about G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe is so important to me. It was the first comic that I ever read as a kid. I would not be the person I am today without G.I. Joe. It was issue 104, MD Bright on art, Larry Hama writing. I'm so thankful that G.I. Joe is back in my life. I love the run that you have been doing with Tom Riley and everybody else. I love the fact that I could go over and still read Larry Hama's run with the Real American Hero on the stands. Still so cool. I love that you brought Road Pig to the comic book series finally. Road Pig was a character that I cherished. I was like 9 years old. I was at Chuck E. Cheese. It was my birthday, and my mom and dad got me the Road Pig action figure. He had that like cement block on a stick. I freaking loved that figure. So to finally read that issue, to get to that page turn where you brought Road Pig into Cobra Commander's life during your run, whoa, what a moment. And so, yeah, I guess what I want to talk about is all these moments, all these opportunities you've been getting to bring in these childhood action figures into your series and give them real life, a new life. What have been the best moments like that Road Pig moment? What is it like to bring that character into your run, to figure out what that character is going to mean for your narrative? And what characters have you not introduced yet that you're itching to introduce? I know everybody asks you that question. We're asking you again. I want a new answer. Give me a new character. Give me an obscure G.I. Joe action figure that you want to see on the page. Anyway, G.I. Joe, I'm loving what you guys are doing. Keep it up. And thanks for taking the time with my question.
Hey,
You know, what's funny about this is I've talked to Brad so many times. I had no idea he was as much of a G.I. Joe fan. Like I had no that he. I don't think he's ever told me that. Like we've talked during interviews and stuff. I don't think he's ever outright been like, "I love G.I. Joe. I've been a G.I. Joe fan." Like he's never said it. So that's really funny. Thank you for that. That's really funny. I did not know that about Brad at all. Which character? God, that's tough. I mean, well, it's funny we're talking about the moments. I mean, I think for me, the moment that I actually really like my first issue of Duke and my first issue of Cobra Commander.
solid.
Like, I think introducing those characters the way we did, I didn't realize what we were doing at the time. I felt like I'm really proud of those issues now. Like, I feel like we did something really interesting. And I remember at the time, other people would read those for the first time, like friends I had, and they would be like, fuck, these are good. And I'd be like, man, whatever. Pfft, just G.I. Joe. You know, I would be like, and I love G.I. Joe. I freaking have like a giant thing of G.I. Joe toys over here. Like, I freaking love G.I. Joe. But I remember at the time being like, you know, I didn't see what we were building, really. You know, I feel like, you know, I mean, I was watching what Daniel was doing or freaking Transformers, and it was just like every page was coming in, and I was like, this is fucking so cool. So I don't know. But those moments, I mean, I think Cobra Commander, being able to introduce Cobra Commander the way we did and change his character just slightly, you know, by literally saying this is a dude who doesn't run away from a fight, he doesn't retreat, and that's the only tweak we're making. And then making him just a nut, you know, like we leveled him up. I think that's probably my most proud thing we've done with G.I. Joe is changing. And the thing is, we've changed some of these characters, but it all feels organic. It doesn't feel like it's contrary. It doesn't feel like we're like throwing the baby out with the bathwater type of thing, you know, I think we're still true to who those characters are. Who have I not? I mean, it's funny because Brad knows this. Like, me and Tom, we really want to introduce Shipwreck. Like, Shipwreck is one. Firefly is another one that I really want to bring in. Sometimes I want to bring in some of the early 90s, like, toxic type characters they created, just because it's like, I think that would be really fun. I think the challenge of that would be really difficult. Man, there are a few, like Big Boa is one we haven't brought in yet, and we almost brought Big Boa in a couple of times, and it didn't work out. Same with Road Pig. Road Pig was supposed to be in the Cobra Commander series, and then we moved it, and I was happy because the way we introduced Road Pig later ended up making more sense and working. I'm gonna say Big Boa. I feel like Big Boa is one. I'm looking at like the wall of toys in here that I have. You know, it's funny. Like, I had some thoughts on Mindbender and Serpentor. I have some ideas for them. I'm not sure we're going to get to it, though. That's always the thing with this. I'm not sure we're going to get to it. But I'm going to say Big Boa. Big Boa is one. I think would be really fun. We almost brought in. I'm not sure if I should say this yet because it kind of depends. There was a character that's only been in the cartoon, never had a toy made ever. There's a character in the cartoon. They only appear. I'm not going to say who it is. I'm curious if your listeners can guess. There is a character in the cartoon who has never been made into a toy ever. They only appear in one episode, but they're the villain of that episode, and it is one of the weirdest episodes of G.I. Joe. And I was going to try to bring that character in, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work the way I wanted it to. We ended up doing something different, but I had this whole plan for this one character for a long time. I can tell you off the record later, but
Deal.
It was somebody I really wanted, but yeah.
There's some G.I. Joe sleuths listening that has already cracked the code. But can I just say that as someone that did not necessarily grow up with G.I. Joe and use the comic series as kind of a launching point for myself, I got to say, man, everything that you've heard from friends about how, I mean, even Ben and Brad, let me say it as someone that does not have a ton of like G.I. Joe background. The series is fucking awesome. I mean, I read the Duke limited series, the Cobra limited series. I think it's just a solid overall product. From the design of the book, I love the design of the whole Energon universe, the visual identity. The writing obviously is amazing. And can I just say the fact that you have given Tom Riley a vehicle to do interiors on a monthly basis is like, I mean, that alone makes a whole Energon series like worth it.
That's the best part of
incredible.
Yeah, working with Tom and working with Andrea, that's the best part of working on G.I. Joe, really. And Ben Abernathy too, who's the executive editor over there, and and Sean Makowitz and Robert and everything, and the fun that we're having building all this stuff. That's probably the best part.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. I think the fun and the passion that you guys are putting into it, from your own fandom of it, like it just comes through in the pages big time. So that's all the voicemails for the Shortbox Friends and Family segment. Like I said, I know that we're working on a time crunch. I would love to have you back on for a part 2, and I actually mean it this time. I say it a lot, but we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of your career. So I think where I want to land is maybe talking about your latest and greatest project, which is Iron Man. Because it's been a decade-long hiatus since you wrote for Marvel. And I'm to understand that your Iron Man run was inspired by 2 things: a family vacation to Disneyland and an idea you had for the character from 10 years ago that you held on to. Can you fill in the gaps of what's missing and how your return to Marvel after a decade at that came to be?
Yeah, I mean, it was really simple. They just asked me. Well, so
had they been trying to bring you on board for a while, and it was just like right project
it was a couple of things. So I went and I had this idea for Iron Man about 10 years ago, more than that now, but I had this idea for Iron Man. It was real simple. It was like, what happens? It started with, he created the armor when he thought he was going to die. If he thought he was going to die again, what would he create next? That's how it started, right? And then I started thinking about the idea of somebody trying to manufacture. I mean, basically what we're doing in the first 5 issues is the idea. Like that's the idea, and then it bleeds out from there, and then there's more. The story on Iron Man will be interesting because it is modular, and that the first 5 issues are a story. Issue 6 is a story, and then 7 through a number, and then it's like there are these mini arcs, but there's one big Uber story, and the Uber story was the idea that I had. And there were other things I was obsessed with, Marvel and Iron Man, and some pieces that I was like, how come they never did this? It was funny. I was talking to them last week about one of the things that I'm doing, and we were talking about it, and the editors at Marvel were like, how come no one's ever done this? There was stuff in there they just they didn't think, but I thought about it. And I have all kinds of, I have a Marvel notebook, just full of ideas that I put down, because that's just how my brain works. I read something, I see something. I remember even when I was reading Jason Aaron's Punisher, the last one he did, I remember reading that first issue and being like, I was 3 pages in, and I was like, it's crazy. No one ever brought his family back from the dead. And then I got to the end of the issue, and I was like, oh, that's what this is about. You know what I mean? So there's times the information just comes up, right?
Yeah.
And I would put it in the notebook. I have ideas for Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, all of it. I would just put in this notebook, right? And then, so my wife and I used to go to Disneyland every year. And now we go almost twice a year, but we used to go every year. And we're actually taking a break. We just went in December, so we're taking a break this year Because we're trying to plan a bigger Florida trip. That's why. But so we went to Disneyland and we got there really early. And we did the whole rope drop thing, whatever. But we did the rope drop at California Adventure, so we did it because I'm a big Disney guy. That's part of it too. Like I'm a big
So you know
big
all
Disney
the
guy.
apps, you know all the tips, and my wife is the same way. When
I
we
got all
go,
the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got all the stuff. It's funny because Scott, he goes to Disney World, I think twice a year, at least once a year, but at least twice, maybe twice a year. And so he knows Disney World really well. We were just talking about this the other day, and I know Disneyland like the back of my hand. I grew up in California, so I used to go all the time.
Word, got it.
And so we were there with my family and everything, and then we went in, and the moment we walked into Avengers Campus and like the music hits, you're in it, right? You're living in Marvel Land, basically, And I remember walking in, listening to the music, and I was just like, man, I was thinking about it. I was like, I kind of made peace in that moment. I was like, I don't think I'm ever gonna work for Marvel. Like it was like a thing, And then I was there, and I was like, I gotta do something. Over here. Like I need to do something. And so I went to, my exclusive with DC was changing to where it was going to be a consulting deal. It was not going to be an exclusive anymore. There's a longer conversation about that we could have. Maybe that'll be the thing we talk about next time. But then, I went there. I was just like, man, I don't know. And so I talked to Marvel a couple times. I was like, listen, I could probably do one book. I could maybe do one book, And some of the editors would reach out to me, we would talk, and so they would be like, what about this, about this, about this? And I would always be like, part of the problem was schedule. It was like, I'm not sure if I have time. Or, oh, that's not the right fit for me. And then I got this email from Will Moss, who is one of the senior editors over there, and he was like, what about Iron Man? And part of me was like, who told you? Because like people who know me know that like I love Iron Man, I love my ideas. And I had this one big idea, this one big story I wanted to tell. And they were like, they did not know that. They were just like, hey, if we're going to get him, we're going to get him for one of our main characters. And I asked them, so I got on a Zoom with them. I told them the whole idea I had. And they were like, this is awesome. I had a bunch of questions, like I wanted to make sure that nobody was getting fired because of me, that they had already planned on wrapping up the previous series and things like that. I wanted to make sure everything was in the up and up. There was no secrets. The other teams knew nothing weird was happening. And they were like, no, like everything's cool. They broke it down for me. I told my idea. And then it was like, I'm not sure if I can do this. Like it became a time issue. It was like, can I do this? And I wasn't sure, but then I really felt like I would regret it. And there was a time I was in here and my son was in here and I have like a shit ton of Iron Man toys in my office. And my son, who didn't know, he was just like, Dad, you really love Iron Man. And I was like, God damn it. And so I was like, all right, so I went to Marvel and we were able to make it work. And they've been really great to work with. My editors, Will Moss and Danny Kazam, they're great. And they've been awesome. And then they brought in Carmen, and Carmen is awesome. Like she's terrific. Yeah. So good. I've been a fan of hers for so long, like Captain Marvel stuff, doing, Captain America. Like, she's great. So it just worked, and I'm really happy with it. Like it's been going really, really well. I have some. It's funny because I think that book is going to get just crazier as it goes. Like there's stuff that's going to happen in Iron Man. People are going to be like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know, man. Like I'm having fun with this character." They're going to be like, "What are you doing exactly?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I know it's starting in one way, but it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger." And then you're going to be like, "What are you doing exactly?" But I really enjoy it. But that's basically what happened, man. It was like, yeah, I had this idea for a long time. I've always liked the character. I've been a fan of that character since I was a kid. And then, boom, here's my, the family connection and stuff. And then the opportunity came, and it took me a while. But I was like losing sleep over it because initially I was like, I can't. The time, my relationship with DC. It was like, I'm not sure if I can do this. But then it was like, I was literally losing sleep over it. And I was like, there's no way I can't take this opportunity. I would regret it. Like, this is one I would regret. But it's been awesome so far. I mean, I really enjoy writing that character.
I think this is applicable to say here, considering that in the movies, they make such a big deal about Tony's heart. It's like kind of a punchline at the end. I think what you just said solidifies or confirms an idea, a thought I had about your career and
Mhm.
why I think you are a writer to watch. You put a lot of heart into it. You put a lot of heart and thought into your projects, and it comes across. And I'm so glad that I got to hear the story and you share it. With that being said, I think this is a perfect place to put a pin in it for part one.
Yeah, well, let me
Definitely
tell you
would
one last thing about that.
come on, yeah.
I appreciate that, and I do make an emphasis. I've had a couple editors at DC actually call me an emotional writer. They were like, "That's that." And they don't mean that in a negative way, but they
Sure,
mean
sure,
like
yeah, yeah.
I dump a lot of
Put your whole
emotions
self
into
into it.
it. Yeah, I feel there's this line from The Office. Michael Scott, who is like, "What's more personal than business?" Right? Like, people are like, "Oh, you gotta keep them separate," and he's like, "No, what's more personal than business?" Like, I think about that shit all the time,
Damn.
like because to me, like, I really love comic books. I love this industry. I love a lot of people that work in it. We all put our. It's so weird. It's such a weird thing. How comics is not just a hobby; it is a lifestyle for people. You know what I mean? It is a piece of us. And so when I'm working on these things, that's what it is. It's a piece of me. So it is very personal to me, and so it is like I do put a lot of heart, a lot of thought, and really a lot of love, And Scott and I talk about this a lot. I am very sincere. I'm not embarrassed of my love for these characters. I'm not embarrassed about I love superheroes and I love comic books. I'm not embarrassed about it at all, and I think I put a lot of that into that work, and so I feel like that's what people pick up on sometimes is that like we can have a whole longer conversation about that stuff too, but that's how I feel about it. I really do put it in there. Yeah.
Amen to that. And I think ending on a Michael Scott quote is the
Yeah.
way to go out with this. With that being said, Joshua, this has been fantastic. I cannot wait to have you back. Maybe we'll arrange something when
Yeah.
Legion of Superheroes comes out. We'll be
For
much
sure.
deeper into Iron Man, and we'll see how Reign of Superboys ends up. But with that being said, ladies and gents, this is the Short Box Podcast, and we just finished talking to comic writer extraordinaire Joshua Williamson about a lot, but still
Yeah.
so much more to go. We
Yeah.
talked about Flash. We talked about his creator-owned stuff. We talked about writing for the love of the game. I mean, we covered a lot of topics. There's still more to talk about, but I hope you enjoyed this part one. We'll have part two in a couple months. We'll see how that works out. I'll have links to Joshua's Instagram and his website in the show notes. We already talked about how many ongoing series he's writing. So it probably behooves you to give him a follow so you don't miss out on all the other things that he's working on that'll be announced soon. Once again, that'll be in the show notes. Thanks so much for checking this out. I'll catch you guys next week. All right. Peace.